Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. How's it going?
Tony, the internet's most sonically challenged college football podcast is going to be even more sonically challenged than usual today. We are both live at Phoenix Airport, which is rather famously one of the busiest airports in the entire United States of America. And there's a busy walkway not very far from me. There are carts running by. You'll hear the beeping of carts telling people to get out of the way. You'll have announcements for passengers who are late. Hey, there's one right now. So we figured we'll give everyone a live show right now. Just talk about the Ohio State Oregon game a little bit while we have some time to kill on our layover.
Yeah, so this show is definitely for the viewers and the listeners. So go ahead and throw your questions in the chat. We will get to those. We have now spoken to everybody we're going to talk to, basically, until after the game. You have gone through a lot of the Oregon sound, and I guess we could start there. What has caught your ears there?
Well, one of the things that the guys were talking about, they had a bunch of different storylines going on. A couple of them centered around Jabbar Muhammad, who is a outside cornerback for the Ducks. There's a few different things that are interesting about him. One of them is that he played under Jim Knowles at Oklahoma State. There's lots of ties between these teams. Carlos Lachlan was, of course, the Oregon running back coach until he moved to Ohio State. And Chip Kelly has coached against Oregon at UCLA pretty recently, and of course was the former Oregon head coach. One of Oregon's defensive backs was a teammate of Will Howard at Kansas State, and now Jabbar Muhammad, of course, had played with Jim Knowles at Oklahoma State. He was asked, were you able to take what you know about Jim Knowles from your time playing for Jim Knowles and, kind of wander over to the offensive meeting rooms and kind of tip them off about anything? And he said he's kind of running different stuff now, which he has better personnel now than he did at Oklahoma State, so he probably doesn't need to be quite as creative, or quite as aggressive as he was at Oklahoma State. But he said, hey, if I can let them know anything, I will certainly let them know something. The other thing that's interesting about Jabbar Muhammad is that he's listed as 5'10". And Tony, when a cornerback is listed at 5'10", how tall is that cornerback?
5'8.5" generally. Certainly not 5'9" by any stretch. I had forgotten that he played at Oklahoma State because he played at Washington last year and then jumped over. And I kind of thought when he transferred over, he might be one of their slot guys, be their slot guy. But he's playing outside. Their slot corner is very good as well. But I know he's got a ton of pass breakups and is one of the nation's leaders in that, I believe. But 5'10" versus 6'3" Jeremiah Smith or 6'2" Carnell Tate, I view that as one of Ohio State's advantages, knowing that he is also one of their best defensive players. So I guess if you have an advantage with one of their best defensive players, is that kind of a tell?
Well, I think that's definitely something that's going to be worth monitoring because he is obviously very athletic, very aggressive, and very good corner. But if you're 5 inches shorter than Jeremiah Smith, who can also jump as high as anyone in the nation and is better at high pointing a ball than anyone in the nation, it feels like if you have a 5-inch at least advantage, then that's probably something where you could find a fade route out there. You can throw the ball up. And you've seen Jeremiah Smith against Michigan State a couple weeks ago. Everyone remembers the one-handed catch. But he had the one earlier in that drive where he went up and over two Michigan State defensive backs, high pointed it with one hand, got face masked on the way down, and still had the reception. So that feels like if you're Oregon and you feel like you're probably slightly outmanned, it feels like Ohio State's personnel is probably slightly better than Oregon. Some of that's probably going to get neutralized by the crowd and the venue and the travel and all that kind of stuff. But if you line up Oregon and just go, here's our 11 versus their 11, most weeks Jabbar Muhammad is going to be you write in a W next to him, and that's an easy one. This week, I don't know. And to your point, if a guy who's normally a win is might not be a win this week in a game this big, that's certainly at least something to monitor.
And Oregon has several of those situations where
Mhm.
normally they would be the big advantage. And even where you would think they have the best advantage or a big advantage, a quarterback versus quarterback. Quarterbacks don't play against each other, but I think most people would just 30,000-foot view see Dylan Gabriel as an advantage for Oregon over Will Howard for Ohio State. But Will Howard against Oregon's defense versus Dylan Gabriel against Ohio State's defense, I think neutralizes some of what Dylan Gabriel does. Also, I think the lack of arm strength also neutralizes some of what they do because it is very close to the line of scrimmage. There's not a lot of downfield stuff. We know the Ohio State secondary is going to be geared up and aggressive. Now, with that aggression, they need to tackle.
Yeah, they definitely need to tackle. That's true really of both defenses. Both of these teams have athletes where if you can get them out in space, you can turn small plays, short passes into big plays. And there was against Michigan State, they threw a tight end screen that went about 2 yards downfield and turned into a 62-yard gain. So that's true of everyone in that offense for Oregon. So tackling, getting guys to the ground is going to be very important. It is, this is definitely a game where a lot of the little stuff is going to matter. The blocking, the not letting a 3-yard gain turn into a 5-yard gain or a 6-yard gain. It's a lot of the stuff they talked about around Caleb Johnson last week with Iowa, and it worked out great against Iowa. When Caleb Johnson got hit after 3 yards, he went down at 3 yards. If they can do that again this weekend, that's going to be a big, big, big impact because Oregon's offense, part of them not throwing the ball downfield is arm strength because Dylan Gabriel is a very efficient, very cool, calm, and collected leader for the most part. He does not have the strongest arm in the world. One of the things for them is they want to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds. That was actually one of the things that he talked about this week. You want to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds because that way it's out. The playmakers are getting it. You're not putting a ton of pressure on your offensive line, but you can't run and out and up in 2.5 seconds. They talked with Jeremiah Smith last week. I think they said that kind of stutter and go was about 3.5 seconds. So that sort of limits you. And you pulled up stats earlier in the week on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com, presented by Jeffrey Luis Columbus, about his passing chart. I saw a graphic about his passing chart and, X amount of passes, 10 yards downfield or less, and then more than 10 yards downfield and 20 yards downfield. An awful lot of it is very close to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull that chart up right now. I will say they have more touchdown drives of 2 minutes or less than 5 minutes or more, which is indicative of the explosive nature of what they do. Maybe also indicative of not having the ability to do a 14-play, 6-minute drive as well, maybe. But yeah, like just looking at his chart here, he behind the line of scrimmage, he is totally 45 of 46 this season. More than 20 yards down the field, he's 8 of 17 and hasn't thrown anything more than 20 yards down the field to the right because he's a lefty, so it's sticking towards the middle of the field or to the left. But even beyond 10 yards, he's thrown 26 passes, and so 43 total passes this year beyond 10 yards. And he's thrown over twice that many 10 yards and in. So it's going to be a situation where I do wonder how much press we see, or is this going to be one of those games where they trigger on what looks to be the quick passes and the screens, in which case don't get got. Basically, when you're triggering, there's a double move. But even watching, I think, didn't Oregon open up with a deep shot to Michigan State that was not completed, and they're just trying to push the secondary back a little bit, ease things up. I wouldn't be shocked if we see that same thing because we know the safeties are going to be triggering as well. So maybe some sort of a double move type of thing to just loosen the secondary up.
Well, it feels like you're sort of making a little bit of a choice. They have been very aggressive with the safeties the last couple of weeks, and that has gotten everyone very excited about Caleb Downs and Caleb Downs being unleashed and all the stuff that you've heard and probably written, many of you, over the last couple of weeks. You can do that, but then it's hard to be in press man, because then if you have or to trigger the way that they have, because then you have the one move and there's no one back there, and that's when you're giving up a 70-yard touchdown, is when you can't be aggressive in all things at all times. So, and that's something that I think they've done a pretty good job of finding balance in, because they have been able to keep teams out of the end zone quite a bit, even when they're in the red zone. They also have not allowed a play of over 30 yards this season. That is a remarkable stat, and that's a testament to the, good play outside, good tackling, and good safety play. And all three of those things have been a big factor in that. But you can't play your safeties real close to the line of scrimmage and also have your cornerbacks being super, super aggressive. The Will Johnson jump the out route and get a pick six is great, but you need to have someone deep in case it's not just an out route. And you kind of have to pick your battles at times, and you can't just play press all the time either. You have to mix it up a little bit, because I go back to the Greg Schiano era where we're a press man team, and they were, but then that made them very predictable, and then that got them beaten sometimes.
Yeah, I want to go through a couple of these questions. Back to the question. Well, we can address the question right now. In Peace Plan, the theme I've been hearing is that if we just run Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson down their throats, is that the feeling of everyone else? I feel like that's one of the things we will see. I feel like Ohio State believes they can run the ball, and so they're going to do their darndest. And I do, by the end of the third quarter, just see this as Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson just piling up yards and first downs. I see Oregon tiring from this, and Ohio State just picking up steam. And we know, I think we talked about the stat earlier about Ohio State outscoring opponents 84-3 in the third quarter this year, and like 36-10 or 52-10, something like that in the fourth quarter. So the second half adjustments, but also just the staying with the running game will eventually pay off, I believe.
Almost certainly. And if you tell me that one of these teams can run for 5 yards per carry and the other one can't, and the other is below 4, that alone, I go, yeah, okay, I can tell you who probably wins this game. You can have a weird outlier game with a bunch of turnovers, but if you can run the ball, that tells me your offensive line is probably controlling the line of scrimmage a decent amount. That's very helpful in terms of who's going to win this game. And if you're winning on both lines of scrimmage, it is very hard to lose a football game if you're winning the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I think Ohio State has better running backs than Oregon does. I think Oregon is a very talented team, but I don't know that there is a team in the nation that you would look at and say, well, this team has better running backs, has a better running back room than Ohio State. I think Ohio State has 2 of the top 5, 8 running backs in the nation. That's pretty hard to beat. And the Oregon defense has been good, but it hasn't been absolutely unstoppable against the run. They look great against the run against Michigan State, but Michigan State is not very good. Or Michigan State didn't do a whole heck of a lot on the ground against Ohio State the week before that either. If Ohio State can run the ball, and I think they can, I think that's going to go a long way towards determining who wins that game.
Yeah, and Steve, there's another question from Steve I want to get to after this one, but this says this game will be won in the trenches and special teams. If you want to involve special teams, it's going to get dicey for Ohio State. They've not done well, they've not excelled in special teams. They've not made things better. They're just not making things necessarily worse. Whereas we know Oregon has already scored twice on returns in the special teams, so that's going to be a focus. Talk with Brandon Innes a little bit about that. They know the expectation. They know that if we're talking about who has the better grade or whatever, like where's Oregon better than Ohio State? They know that people are saying Oregon's special teams are better than the Ohio State special teams. So there's going to be, there's always pride on the line, but also the Ohio State special teams is what it is. It's what it's been forever. I think a good special teams outing for Ohio State here is just keeping Oregon from having a good special teams outing.
Yeah, it feels like if Ohio State can win in the trenches and just not lose on special teams, they probably win the game. They don't need to win the game on special teams. They have advantages in a whole lot of other places. If they can just not give up a big return in the special teams and not have a kick blocked and have, something like that, you don't have to win. You just have to not lose there. And that's a little bit of a luxury. I think, broadly, I look around the field, and if you're going to look at just matchups, Ohio State's offensive line versus Oregon's defensive line, and Oregon's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line, and running backs versus linebackers, or however you want to match things up. I don't know how many areas I look at and go, clear advantage Oregon. I think there's somewhere there's clear advantage Ohio State. I think there's a bunch where this is probably going to be pretty close. I don't know that there's anywhere that I look and I go, this is definitely an area where Oregon has a big advantage.
No. To the next question from Steve about the Josh Fryar. Thoughts on Josh Fryar saying he really doesn't like the bright lights and playing on national TV. It sounded weak. I knew that was not going to go over well. I don't know if you were over there, Tom, yesterday when he was asked, how do you like these games? And he's like, I don't really care for the national TV games because if you play poorly, you hear about it more. And somebody was standing next to me. He's like, all of the games are on national television, which is true. But except for, and then as somebody said, except for Peacock. But with playing at Ohio State comes all of the criticism. We talked yesterday about don't at the players. That's what Josh Fryar is talking about. It's not that he doesn't love the big games. It's that he knows if you screw up, you're going to hear about it. This is not about, I don't want to play Oregon. It's like, I don't want to hear from Ohio State fans in my mentions. I think is basically what from a segment of fans in his mentions. No matter how well you play, if you have 2 bad snaps, you're terrible. And you're going to hear about it. And I think that's what he's talking about. That the stage is the stage, but I knew it wasn't going to go over well because you prefer somebody to say, I don't care. I don't care what people say. I don't look at that stuff. Go back to Isaiah Prince. They had to take his phone away after the Penn State game in 2016 or 17 or whatever. It's not always a safe place for Ohio State football players.
No, and it's a position where it's a lot like being a long snapper, where you can be great or even just do your job very effectively. You don't need to be Orlando Pace. You don't need to be pancaking people every play. But if you pass block successfully on 30 pass attempts and you get the quarterback blindsided once, all anyone's going to remember is the one where the quarterback got blindsided. That's sort of the nature of the position, and it's not really fair, but it's sort of the nature of the position. And I think it's telling to me that the Ohio State coaching staff, there were positions where there were positional battles this year. Right tackle was never a position where there was a serious positional battle. I think the Ohio State coaching staff feels like Josh Fryar is a good option for them there. Is he going to be Orlando Pace over there? No, he's probably not. But that they don't need Orlando Pace. They just need good, solid. Maybe you need to help him out with a tight end here and there to chip, whatever, The Ohio State running backs have been very good at blitz pickup, and maybe they can help with chipping someone as well. You don't need perfection, and I don't think perfection is a fair standard to demand out of anyone. If he is just good, that's probably good enough tomorrow night on Saturday night.
Well, Ohio State won a national title with Darryl Baldwin as a right tackle, and I don't know how many people remember that. And you don't need to be great on the offensive line. You just need to be good enough for that particular day. Question from Situated for this Ohio State team looking for a slow feel-out first half again, as per usual, likely tied at 10 at the half. OSU-specific adjustments at the half, and then OSU's overall talent pulls away in the third quarter. It's like this guy has watched Ohio State football before. But I think you'll see the whole feeling out period where before you know it, the first and second quarter are gone. Like they dissipate, and then it's like then the game really starts in the third quarter. Once everybody's kind of got their feet wet and they know what's going on, and if that's the way it goes, if Ohio State is tied at the half, I think is that a win for the Buckeyes?
If they're tied at the half, I don't think it's a loss for the Buckeyes.
Is it a tie?
I think, I don't know that it's a win because you're favored. So, and I think the expectation for most people is that they win. it is certainly not a bad thing for Ohio State to be tied at the half, because you do get the sense that in the end, the talent probably wins out. The only reason I'm kind of hesitating here is because the reason you've seen some of the upsets you've seen this year is because with the new clock rules, the game has been shortened. With the game being shortened, you get fewer plays, you get fewer possessions. With fewer possessions, the games have been lower scoring. When the games are lower scoring, you have a little less margin for error. There's a little bit more chance for the one weird play, the one fluky play, the one whatever to turn the game. You go back to like the 2016 Penn State game, since you just brought it up. Low scoring game where you have a game where, hey, you get a field goal blocked, you get a punt blocked, and boom, that's enough to swing the game. Or another Penn State game, the 2008 Ohio State Penn State game, I think ended up 13-6 or something like that, or 10-6, where it's Terrell Pryor has one fumble that gets picked up and I think run back for a touchdown, and that's it. And that was the deciding factor of the game. On the other side, Chris Gamble, interception, pick 6 against Penn State, 13-7. That one play, the one bad throw by Zach Mills, and that's the game right there. So if it is a lower scoring game and you're down, you're through a half of it already, there just aren't that many possessions. There's not that much opportunity to pull away. You need a mistake or two to really be able to pull away in the second half. You need a mistake or two from Oregon for Ohio State to be able to pull away in the second half. So I don't think that a tie score at the half is a win for Ohio State by any means, but it's also not a real cause for panic or anything. They are a good second half team. They do, I think, have better talent and better depth than Oregon that probably wins out ultimately. So it's not, it is a tie at half is neither good nor bad, is I guess my extremely hot take.
Well, thank you for that. But it was also it was an okay question, not a great question by me. But you're talking about the slowed down pace and the fewer possessions. Like that's a very real thing. And we started talking about this last year at the start of the season, and then pace has slowed down even more because of the in-helmet communication and the huddling now that goes on. I don't even know the last time I watched a game where a team was up tempo the entire time. Like there's kicks and starts with that sort of thing. Maybe they get an extra series or two out of this game just because Oregon does have shorter drives, whether that's a touchdown drive or a 3 and out. If they're not getting the first downs, maybe that leads to a few more possessions. But I don't know that you can expect more than 11 or 12 possessions. And if you only score on 4 of those, you might be in a bad situation. So you're to the point where you almost, if you want to win, you got to score on half your drives, and most of those drives need to end in touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, in a game where you're playing with relatively fine margins, and a game where you're playing a team where the talent is equated, as they say, a matchup game is what they call it. This is a game where every drive needs to end with a kick, and you can kick a field goal or two, and it's not the end of the world. But you're gonna have to continue to be very good in the red zone, and that's something that Ohio State's been able to do a bunch this year. And I think there's a lot of different factors that go into that. One is the offensive line has been better. 2 is that the running backs have been better. 3 is the threat of the quarterback run. And 4 is the addition of Chip Kelly. All of those factor in together to what has been a dramatically improved Ohio State run game. And the dramatically improved Ohio State run game has led to dramatically improved Ohio State results in the red zone, because you have to be able to run the ball in the red zone. You can't just throw in the red zone. That's something that I could see kind of biting Oregon. If Ohio State's able to run the ball and Oregon's not, that's when you see Dylan Gabriel kind of getting forced to make a throw into a tight window, and that's where you get a mistake like you saw last week. If Ohio State's able to run the ball in the red zone, that then that potentially singles up someone against Jeremiah Smith or Mecca Ibuka or Carnell Tate or something like that, and then that opens up the threat of that run then opens up the pass more, and then you really can be pretty dynamic and unpredictable down there.
Well, and we've seen that the run threat of Will Howard makes them more effective in the red zone. First of all, he's finished a couple of drives in there. And we know over the years when they've tried to bring in a red zone quarterback, whether that's Devin Brown, whether that's Tate Martell, whoever, Will Howard is already that guy, so that makes them more effective. Dylan Gabriel can be that guy, but has chosen to throw 3 interceptions in the red zone the last 2 weeks. Comment there from Tom McElmurray, Buckeye fan from France. Really enjoy your podcast. Thanks, Tom. Can you say welcome and thank you in French with an Australian accent?
No, but thank you for asking. I can say je m'appelle. I can say bonjour. I am not a French speaker. No, sorry, sadly. If he was from Germany, I could help him out. Yes, I have been to Canada. I haven't been to Quebec in quite a while. But yes, if he was from Germany, I could help him out a lot more. But no, sadly. And we've had a number of people asking where the heck we are. We are at the Phoenix airport right now, on our way out there. We have an extended layover, so we figured we'd hop on and do a live show here.
Quite extended.
Quite unwelcomely extended. Peace Clan says the theme I've been hearing is that we. Oh, sorry, we already did that one. I apologize. Here's one I know we haven't done.
Tony, is Tom allowed to get Wi-Fi on the plane? Better question, I guess. Does he deserve that privilege? Tom can get Wi-Fi. He's allowed, but you don't need it though. You're working on. You're cutting videos. You're cutting podcasts. You don't need that internet. It's just a distraction.
Yeah, I've been. I spent the trip down here, A, sleeping, and then B, going through a bunch of sound from Oregon interviews this week and Ohio State interviews this week. We're dropping a bonus episode with an interview with Will Howard earlier in the day. We're going to have a show with a bunch of interview clips from Oregon players and coaches coming up a little later on this afternoon. Then we'll have another one with Ryan Day from Wednesday night, as well as Denzel Burke and Josh Fryar, including the soundbite that was asked about earlier. That's all going to be coming out a little later on in the afternoon. That one will probably come out while we're on the plane to Portland. And then there was another question in there about whether we're going to have a live show later tonight. The plan is yes. All of this is subject to the whims of the airlines, the weather, the baggage claim folks, and the hotel Wi-Fi. But yes, the tentative plan is to have another live show when we actually get to Portland later this evening.
What happens if it's too quiet in the hotel room to do a show? What do we do then? Just leave the TV on very loudly?
Well, Mike Ferguson has a great suggestion, which is dragging an airport bench across the terminal during the stream. I mean, listen, we have a brand, Tony. Is it a good brand? Well, it's a brand. That's the important thing.
At least people know it. They recognize it. They see the logo. They understand it. They hear the noise.
Chris Jimenez says, could we see Judkins and Henderson on the field together as a new wrinkle on Saturday?
I don't know that you necessarily need to do anything new, but I mean, they do something new. They add stuff every single week. The question is, what do you get out of it? What's the positive that comes out of it? Now, both of them are physical players. Are they going to get the blocks that you need, or is this just a show and tell type of thing? Basically, they're not going to do it for no reason. And so whether they do it and don't do anything with it, then it's being done for something later on. So if you see it, it's not just because it's not just, hey, let's do this. But there are advantages to having that because you don't know who's going to get the ball of those two. You expect one of them to, which means you're not necessarily expecting one of them to, which provides some sort of an advantage. We've talked about it for years, this whole two tailback set. Maybe we'll see it. I know Chip Kelly has done the T formation. Maybe we see some of that in the red zone, in the low red zone. I'm just thinking stick with what's worked and then build off of what you've done successfully.
Yeah, I think that's sort of been the watchword has been iteration. They have kind of taken what they've done and then here's the next logical step off of that. And we're gonna run this, and then we think you're going to defend it doing X, and the way that we're going to immediately counterpunch what we expect you to do is by doing something else. So we've seen that where they run. Ross Fulton calls it the super counter, where you've got like three guys pulling in front of the running back on the counter play. They showed that. You saw teams sort of start to adapt to that. And then what do? Well, they show that, and then they give it to Jeremiah Smith going the other way. And, essentially a walk-in touchdown against Michigan State. That's the kind of stuff that you've seen. And go back through some of the shows that Ross has done. I know that a lot of people have watched them. I see the numbers. But Ross has done a really good job of laying out how sometimes it's three plays from the same drive. Okay, they showed this. Okay, then the next iteration of that is this. And then sometimes it's just changing who's blocking or changing who you're reading on a play. Sometimes it's something like you run the ball one way and then you fake running the ball that way and go the other way. there's different variations on it, but Chip Kelly has done a fantastic job with all of that stuff this year. I think Chip Kelly's having a lot of fun coaching and calling plays with the talent that he has, because he has not had that kind of talent, at least that kind of talent advantage probably at any point in his career. His talent in the NFL probably better, but not the talent advantage that he currently enjoys. Peace Clan says, here's one. I've heard that the Oregon cornerbacks don't like getting their nails dirty tackling, especially when they are dealing with a violent runner or runners. We have to. I didn't see that last week, but Michigan State is not really the most exciting power running team. So I would like to, early in the week, I asked Kevin if he could find a copy of the Boise State game, because I really did want to see Austin Genty and what they look like going against him. I don't know if he did that or not, but I would love to find a full copy of that game to be able to watch the whole thing. I've seen sort of extended highlights, but not the whole game. That I feel like watching that would really tell me a lot about the answer to this question.
Well, and I don't, I think a lot of corners would prefer not to deal with Quinshon Judkins one-on-one or head-on, and it's not just going to be Judkins, it's also going to be Henderson, but also fighting through some physical blocking. So this is going to be the most physical game that the Oregon secondary has played. When we talked to Denzel Burke, he's talking about how this is going to be the best secondary that Oregon has faced this year. This is also going to be the most physical group of receivers and running game that the Oregon secondary has faced. So they're going to need to step up. And if I don't know where those rumors are coming from or those reports, I would just say that it's not atypical of a lot of secondaries over the years when you can see it, players with an opportunity to get in there and they just kind of, somebody's going to pick it up. I'll let the safeties handle it, that sort of thing. But you can be aggressive, and you can be aggressive the first time, and then you might not want to be as aggressive the second time.
Well, and this is something that I talked to Ross about. This was probably on last week's show, maybe, in terms of blocking, who you're going to try and block. There's an old adage: block safeties, not corners. Like trust that you can beat a corner, because corners are generally smaller, shorter, not as heavy, not necessarily as strong. It's a lot more, thin guys. Think about, the difference between how Davis and Igbinosun is built and Caleb Downs, for example. Kind of different guys, both very effective football players, but built in kind of a different way. And not everyone who's built like Davis and Igbinosun is as physical as Davis and Igbinosun. So in that way, he's not a great example of the not physical corner. But yeah, I think that's something that in general, yeah, if you can get a matchup on a corner with a big physical running back, that's probably going to be a win in a lot of cases. Mika says, I hope Carnell Tate is fully healthy. There is every indication that Carnell Tate is fully healthy. Carnell Tate could have played last week, is what we've been told, and there is definitely going to be playing this week, based on everything we've been told and all available information on and off record.
Right. Yeah. Ryan Day said he had a good week of practice, so he's going to be good to go. And they missed him, and they'll get him back and see how he does in the passing game and the running game.
Mm-hmm. Jeff Johnson says, worry about Iowa's tight end. Iowa's only real weapon last week was Lachey. And that's definitely a concern, because it's a little bit of a mismatch. You look at Ohio State's corners against Oregon's wide receivers, you don't see a huge mismatch there. There's been enough concern about the Ohio State linebackers over the last few weeks that a tight end getting out against a linebacker, that could be a concern. And he had a 62-yard gain on a screen last week. That's an enormous play for a tight end. And I want to make sure we have Mika said Ferguson concerns me a little. There's a couple Fergusons on the Oregon offense, so that's why I'm not sure which one she means there, but
I'm sure
there's Tez Ferguson, who's the slot receiver, and then Terrence Ferguson is the tight end. So there's two T.E. Fergusons on the Oregon offense. So yeah, Terrence Ferguson is the tight end is what we're talking about. Tez Ferguson, the slot guy, he's
Tez Johnson.
I'm sorry, Tez Johnson. I'm sorry.
2 hours of sleep.
If that, yes. Tez Johnson, the slot guy, yes. He's a definitely, I think he's someone to keep an eye on as well. I don't know that there's this is a problem. There's YouTube videos like, John Starks was a problem. Like, intermittently, yes. Sometimes for the Knicks, sometimes against the Knicks. He's. I don't know that I look at Terrence Ferguson and go, problem. I think it's just kind of a like monitor the situation. It's like Dennis is like, is that a cavity? No, we're just going to keep an eye on it. Like that feels like that's sort of where the Oregon tight end situation is to me.
Well, like Mika says, concerns me a little. And,
yeah.
You know, I think it's easy to watch that screen go 60 yards or whatever and be like, well, that's clearly a guy that you have to worry about. And there's been a lot of talk about him. If you without that one screen over his previous the last 4 games, you take that screen away, and he's got 110 yards receiving. So, you know, that's not a lot. You're talking 25, 30 yards receiving a game, which if they hold him to 25 or 30 yards, that's 3 or 4 catches. I think they will take that right now and then move on to the next suggestion.
Mika says she loves Ross's breakdowns. Same. They take a little while to put together, but I find myself, I always learn something when I do a show with Ross. Let's see. Let's go to, how about this one? For Mike Ferguson, does Tom clap and stand up when the plane lands? I did stand up. I did stand up. My legs were a little stiff, and I don't fit extremely well into airplane seats due to leg length. So I did stand up, but I was mostly helping the lady next to me with her bag. So really, I don't want to say cute, but
that was a hard landing we had today. So I did feel like almost clapping a little because there were some like, oh,
yeah.
The lady next to me, like, woke up because of the landing. But we're here, so we made it. So yes, Tom. I mean, he doesn't even wait for like the seatbelt light. He's already standing up.
Not true.
He's opening up the overhead. He's trying to get to the front of the line. He's pushing little old women down. It's typical Mets fan behavior.
It was. I do wait for the plane to get to the gate, but then I'm not in a huge hurry to continue sitting in my seat that I've been sitting in for 4 hours. Sorry, maybe that's a me problem. Here's one from PDX Buckeye. PDX is the airport code in Portland, so I'm going to guess this is a native of Portland. So wants to know if we're going to do a food restaurant review while we were in Eugene, which would be Eugene. Past eating videos, and I read this initially as taste eating videos, so I'm glad it was in fact past eating videos. Have been fun to view. Have fun while you're ordering. We are definitely planning on doing at least one. If you have suggestions on a Portland spot, we are all for it. We're staying kind of out on the west side of downtown, so anything over there, we're open to suggestions on stuff. But yes, we are planning on doing something down in Eugene as well while we're down there. Let's see. Here's one from Mika. Always optimistic Mika. Thinks Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock are going to have interceptions for touchdowns. Tony, how many points in the bold prediction show would 2 separate individual predictions of pick sixes be worth?
That's a 10-pointer. I mean, you're talking about parlaying a 3 and a 3, basically. So 9-pointer. We'll just multiply it by each other. But if that happens, where would you put Ohio State's odds, the percentage of winning the game? If they get 2 pick sixes from those 2 guys, are we talking like 94%, 96%?
Yeah, I mean, and those numbers don't mean as much to me as they did a couple weeks ago before the last couple weeks of the playoffs, where teams with 98% win percentages seem like they're about 500. But yeah, you know, what was the Urban Meyer stat? If you block a punt, you win 100% of your games. Well, if you have 2 pick sixes, I am struggling to remember an example in college football history where a team had 2 pick sixes in a game and also lost.
Is your smoke detector going off over there, Tom? What's going on over there?
No, it's not.
You changed the battery. It's just a 9-volt.
Justin Courtney says Oregon wins, and that's absolutely a possibility. I'm interested in more on that. What's the reason specifically for optimism? Is that Oregon's going to win in the trenches? Is that Oregon's going to be able to get consistent pressure on Will Howard and force bad decisions? Is that Oregon's going to just be able to keep it close and win on special teams? Like this is a say more situation, because I'm interested, because it feels like pretty much everyone is picking Ohio State to win. So that's why I'm interested. If you think Oregon wins, I'm interested in the why behind that.
Well, and as JJ says it from 828, no one thinks Oregon can get the upset on Ohio State. I don't think you're going to see anybody around here saying Oregon can't win, because
No.
they absolutely can. We've been to too many road games against watching Ohio State playing games they can't lose and seeing them lose to Purdue and Iowa to think that they can't lose in this one. But if Ohio State plays its best game, Oregon's going to lose. If Oregon plays its best game, Ohio State would need to match. And I think Ohio State's ability to match is greater than Oregon's ability to match.
JJ, that was a word from JJ. Norman's Oregon get the upset. Yeah, I think, I was asked earlier in the week if you had to rank Ohio State wins close, Ohio State wins big, Oregon wins close, Oregon wins big, rank those in the order of likelihood. I think Oregon wins big is number 4, and I think Ohio State wins close is number 1. And then Ohio State wins big, and big is like Ohio State wins by 10 is probably about as likely to me as Oregon wins by 3. And that's, if you want to say 50% chance Ohio State wins by a one-possession game, and a 20% chance that Oregon wins a one-possession game, and a 20% chance Ohio State wins a two-possession game or more, and give me the last 10% on Oregon wins by 2 possessions or more, something like that, a breakdown somewhere, something like that. Anonymous Union Soldier is lying. No one wants that. So here's Justin.
Put your name on
here's
that.
Justin.
I heard you.
Here's Justin's thinking. Keep it close and don't trust Howard. The run game for OSU will have success, but I think the home field advantage and Howard will be the downfall. That's reasonable. I think that's, if the run game for Ohio State has success, I think that probably puts them in a very good chance to win. That does not mean you're outside the margin of one bad throw or one bad decision or a tipped pass, or Ohio State, the motto this year has been leave no doubt. So I don't know if this is a game where they're going to be able to leave no doubt. Maybe it's possible. I think there's going to be a game, this is a game where there's going to be some doubt in the last 10 minutes. And if it's a game where there's some doubt in the last 10 minutes, you were always 1 or 2 plays away from potentially losing. So this is definitely not a game where I'm looking and going, we're not going to lie to you. If the Michigan State game, it was like the path for Michigan State to win was, and then a miracle happened. We're not going to lie to you. This is a game where Oregon can absolutely win the game. I don't think it is the most likely outcome here.
But I understand the not trusting of Will Howard, because what has he done over his career to earn that trust from the majority of people? It's hard to earn trust when you're driving the Kansas State bus, I guess, when an overtime loss to Texas is about as big of a win as you have, other than a win over TCU in the 2022 Big 12 championship game that beat Michigan in the playoffs. So I mean, those are the bigger wins that we're talking about. So he's done it, but I mean, this is a new situation in Autzen Stadium. It's going to be a new environment for everybody. So it's not just how Will Howard handles it; it's how the tackles handle it. It's how the tackling of it goes. But also, as we've talked about all week long, and Will Howard has talked about, there's 1 or 2 throws that he shouldn't make. There's 1 or 2 plays that he shouldn't do. Does he do those? And do they hurt Ohio State, or do they just end up being dropped by Jabbar Muhammad or a safety? Or do they capitalize? Because he's thrown interceptions against Michigan State in the end zone, a dropped interception that turned into a touchdown. Dylan Gabriel throws that same pass, it's intercepted. Now, the results of the game are the same, but I wonder if this just comes down to which of the 2 quarterbacks doesn't do what they've been doing of late.
Yeah, which quarterback can do the don't do what Donnie don't does? That's kind of one of the big questions. These are such similar quarterbacks in some ways, where they can make plays with their legs, not the strongest arms, pretty efficient, sometimes make mistakes. And AJ Coomer says Dylan Gabriel's mistakes have been due to overconfidence playing lower competition. The Oregon defensive front 7 is very deep. And that's, Oregon's defensive front 7 is a big reason why, if Oregon wins the game, it's going to be a lot on the Oregon defensive front 7 to get pressure, to force Will Howard into making quick decisions and potentially making bad decisions. If one of these quarterbacks turns the ball over twice in the red zone, the team's going to lose. I don't think you're going to win a game if you're turning the ball over twice in the red zone like Dylan Gabriel did last week. And we have seen Will Howard had close to turnovers in the red zone. I mean, you mentioned the one against Michigan State. That takes me back to last year where Kyle McCord won the game against Notre Dame. Now, 3 plays before Kyle McCord won the game against Notre Dame, he gave linebacker empty hands with a pass that would have ended the game as an interception and caused Notre Dame to win the game, and the guy didn't catch it. And then that all gets forgotten when you make the play at the end. Sometimes you get lucky, and that's true. Dylan Gabriel got lucky last week where he hit a Michigan State guy on an out route, and the corner jumped it, but he jumped it at an angle where he was going out of bounds, because if he had caught it going upfield a little more, a step quicker, going upfield a little more, it's 100 yards the other way. So I think both quarterbacks have gotten a little bit fortunate and a little bit unlucky at times with some of the bad decisions.
Well, and that's basically what I said in terms of the mistakes, the interceptions coming from just not having as much, being a little too cocky, being a little too overconfident. But all 3 of his interceptions this season, these last 2 weeks, have come from those out routes that he does not necessarily have the arm strength to make, but he thinks he can. And so if he gets too confident, too cocky with those against Ohio State, you might see the same result. So I think the anticipation has to be quicker, the throw has to be quicker. He can't be delayed, he can't be waiting. He's got to get the throws out as quickly as he can. That way, the receivers still have a little bit of an advantage before everything closes down, because he doesn't have the arm strength to make up for being too slow getting the ball out.
Right, and we talked about it earlier with Dylan Gabriel, 2.5 seconds. I think that's going to be true to a certain degree for the Ohio State offense as well, where I don't know that either of these teams is going to just be able to just meticulously pass protect for 4 seconds. I think you're going to have to get the ball out. That's going to be part of the game plan, probably for both of these teams. And Justin says, well, Howard's going to need to complete some deep passes, but he hasn't been great at that. The short throws, I don't think, will work versus Oregon. One thing that helps on the deep passes is they don't have to be perfect, because you can sometimes run the Jeremiah Smith do something cool play. And the one last week was kind of a stutter and go, and he was way behind the defensive backs, and the ball was a little underthrown, and it was fine. He got it in a spot where only Jeremiah Smith could catch it, so it worked fine. But it was definitely not a perfectly thrown ball. But if you're open by 5 yards, the ball doesn't need to be perfectly thrown.
Well, and real quick, Tom,
I
think you could say the same thing back to that last question. You could just change the names of the 2 quarterbacks and say the exact same thing, because Dylan Gabriel's not been great at the downfield throws, and he also needs to protect the ball. And Will Howard also needs to protect the ball. So, super chat.
Yeah, I think that there a lot of the strengths and the weaknesses of the quarterbacks are very, very. I mean, these are very similar guys in my mind, and which one of them is better is almost depends on when you're asking. It's not even depends on the week. It might be depends on what time you're asking. Speaking of depending on what time it is, King Bronco, what do we think about Josh Fryar saying that it's a Josh Fryar quote that he asked that we discussed earlier about not loving being on national TV, because then everyone jumps your track if you're not if you're not perfect. I don't think Michigan has loved being on national TV this year either. There have been a couple games where I think Michigan would have been very happy to be playing on Peacock instead of a nationally televised outlet. And I'm going to guess that the response from the Michigan fan base has been broadly similar to the response from literally every other fan base in a moment like that, which is, number one, unfortunate, but also number two, kind of sadly universal.
Yeah. It's the state of society and the game right now. If you play poorly and people see it, they're going to let you know that they saw it and that you're terrible, and maybe you should think about dying.
Anonymous Union Soldier says, which Ohio State receiver carries the day?
Here's what I'll say. I think Oregon is a very good nickelback that will be defending Emeka Egbuka. Jabbar Muhammad, we know, is a pretty good guy. So is it the other guy? Is it basically whichever receiver is being defended by the third quarter? But they're also not going to go away from whoever is being defended by Jabbar Muhammad. They're going to go with progressions that they have. They're not going to let any of their defensive backs dictate, in terms of the corners, dictate where they go. It's going to be dictated by the coverage, where are the open spots, that sort of thing. I think they will go after whomever, and they don't care who it is because they trust all three of their starters. Now, we just saw Emeka Ibuka catch 3 touchdowns last week. Carnell Tate has yet to really explode, so he's due. But I'm thinking it's just going to be another Emeka Jeremiah Smith thing, and maybe one of them has 2 touchdowns this week, and the other only has 1.
Yeah, I think when in doubt, assume it's Jeremiah Smith until proven otherwise. I think that's probably not a bad. Either you're going to have Muhammad on him all day, all night, 24/7. In which case, you're still going to throw him the ball 5 times at least, or you don't, and then you have the mismatch. And if they have him on Jeremiah Smith all day and all night, Jeremiah Smith is going to get thrown the ball, but then Carnell Tate is probably going to be the one that has a big day. This is very much a pick your poison thing, and it's the thing about picking your poison is it's still poison. Even if it's like, well, no, good, this is a different flavor of poison. This is not the Jeremiah Smith flavor of poison. So this is probably good for me. Oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. There's not a good kind of poison to drink. That's kind of the whole point of the thing.
Why do they make antifreeze taste like Kool-Aid? Why do they do it?
Now, here's one for Mika that I think is a real possibility. I think Tyleik Williams goes off. She says, if you told me that Tyleik Williams has like 3 tackles for loss, and we haven't done the ball prediction show yet, so maybe I should stop talking right now. But a big day for Tyleik Williams. A couple tackles for loss, maybe a sack, maybe a couple quarterback hurries or a PBU or whatever. This feels like a game where the interior of Oregon's offensive line might not be. The interior of the Ohio State defensive line might not be a great matchup for the interior of the Oregon offensive line. That's another one of those. I'm not saying this is definitely going to be a disaster, but kind of watch this space. If things are, that's one of those areas that's kind of like it's a little like the Oregon tight end thing where it's like, maybe it'll be a big thing. Maybe it won't be a big thing, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think if Tyleik Williams doesn't go off, I think the defensive coaching staff will be surprised. Ryan Day would be surprised. I think they see this as an advantage for them that they're going to utilize, and that it's going to be very, very impactful because it's going to, in theory, eliminate some of the run between the tackles. In theory, it's going to rush Dylan Gabriel out of the pocket into somebody else, or at least offset the timing of any of the throws. And also, they'll probably do some rollouts just to avoid that, which then eliminates half of the field. So you're just flooding the field with one, on one side with a rollout, which I would assume would mostly be to the left because I don't think he's great rolling out to the right. So I think a lot of this would completely agree with Mika. It hinges on what Tyleik Williams does, and we'll throw Ty Hamilton in there as well.
And if you can limit Jordan James, and he hit run inside, a lot of his effectiveness last week was inside against Michigan State. If you can take that away, then you're sort of limiting things. And we talked earlier about the fact that Dylan Gabriel does not throw the ball downfield a whole heck of a lot. So then if you can get some pressure and you can force him left, and also been able to run the ball in the middle, and also he's rolling left, then that takes away the right side of the field and even kind of the middle of the field. And also if he doesn't throw the ball downfield, it's like, well, now you're defending a much smaller portion of the field. That makes it much easier to defend that portion of the field. And sure, you can go out of that, but you can, late and over the middle, famously not a great way to throw a football, not a great place to throw a football, not a great time to throw a football. And sure, he can throw it downfield, but that's very clearly not what they want to do. They don't want to be throwing the ball downfield traditionally in this offense. So, yeah, I think if you can get them away from the stuff they want to do, that's probably a pretty big win. Peace Clan says, overall, it seems like this team is more eager to play than anything and have a great deal of confidence. Boy, talking to Denzel Burke last night, he was very careful not to say anything inflammatory, but it was very clear he is very excited to play this game. He views this as a real opportunity for them. And I think the level of confidence is reasonably high right now. No one came out and guaranteed a win or anything silly like that, but you get the sense that they view this as a game that they can win, should win, and feel like they probably will win.
Yeah, and that's both sides of the ball. Both sides of the ball, very confident in this one. In which case, if everything goes wrong, then you're like completely lost. What what did we not know? What have we learned? What does it matter? How could we have been so misled? So best to just avoid all of that internal monologue with every single player and trying to address all of the things that went wrong.
Yeah, Mark Fetter says Jeremiah Smith over under 1.5 one-handed catches.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go under, but over is generally what hits. It would have hit last week. I think it would have hit the week before. If this were a bold prediction, I don't know that it would be worth the points at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like what, 2 one-handed catches, is that worth the point anymore?
Yeah, 2 one-handed catches, maybe. I don't know that I'll tell you what, I will take that, but I won't allow you to take that. How's that? I feel like 2.5 is the real over under now.
But then 3 feels like 2.
Yeah, it does. It does. Just because Kevin can't delete this comment fast enough, Mark Fetter says go Padres. Justin Courtney, since in the interest of equal time, Justin Courtney says go Yankees. I don't know. That's one of those teams that's still playing in the LDS, I believe. I don't know. Couldn't be me. My team's already in the LCS, so I don't know. I guess
poverty team.
Yeah, Yankees, famously a poverty team. Yes, Mark Fetters approves of the Mets hat. Jeff Johnson says, was it a conscious decision by Tony to not be too near Tom asking for Jordan?
Yeah, well, we got mics going, and sometimes there's interference, and you try to find a safe spot to basically stay away from Tom. Basically, yes, correct.
And if we're in the same space and there's extremely loud noise here, one of us can't mute our computers and have the other one talk for a while. So, yeah, there's a multitude of reasons for this setup. Yes. AJ Coomer, this is a really interesting comment. As an Oregon fan, I'm most worried about not being able to run inside and leaving us vulnerable to pass rush if we get behind the sticks. The quick throw can soften that, though. I don't disagree with any of that.
Yeah. No, the quick throws will be part of the running game. That's what we've seen at Ohio State over the years. They consider the RPOs and the screens out wide just part of the running game to soften up and run those defensive tackles from sideline to sideline so that you can eventually run up the middle on Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. So you just try to tire them out. But if Oregon is able to run the ball early on, I think that would surprise some people. But also, if it's the first drive, it's the first drive. And how often have we seen that first drive go well for somebody, and then the game starts, then things settle in, and you adjust. But yeah, I would expect Ohio State to run the ball better in this one. They have every reason to, and they have the personnel to do it. The Ohio State run defense has been very good outside of a couple of busts, and it's not been 60 yards. It's been like 25 or 30. But if it would have happened at the far 30, it would have gone 70. So I think they've been fortunate where some of these busts have happened. But you need to force Dylan Gabriel all the way down the field. If they want to dink and dunk and nickel and dime, eventually you're going to get a tackle for loss on something, and now you're talking 2nd and 12 or a 3rd and 8, and then maybe that's where you can stop them.
Mike Ferguson says, banish Tom to a bathroom stall. That is, I think, the only way you could make the acoustics on the show worse if you're in a bathroom with nothing but hard surfaces for the noise to echo off of. And, you gotta be a little concerned about what the person next to you is doing as well in that kind of situation. That's might have to really give the mute button a workout depending on how things go. Justin Courtney says, how do you think OSU defends Tez, that'd be Tez Johnson, the slot receiver for Oregon? I think we've seen a lot of 4-3 from Ohio State the last couple of weeks. I think this is a week when the 4-3 is probably going to go sit on the sideline for a while, and you're going to see a whole lot of Jordan Hancock. And you put Jordan Hancock on him, and if that doesn't work, you figure something else out. But that feels certainly to me like that's going to be plan A, because Tez Johnson has not been a huge play guy for Oregon. He has just been a very efficient move the sticks guy. I think last week he was 10 catches for 84 yards or something like that. I'll do the math for you. That's 8 yards and some change per catch. But that's the play that turns 1st and 10 into 2nd and 2, and then keeps the whole playbook open and opens things up for you, or it turns 3rd and 5, which is a difficult play, into a 1st down. So that's going to be one of those matchups that's really worth keeping an eye on, because if one team or the other is very clearly winning that one, that's going to make a big difference in terms of Oregon being able to sustain drives.
Yeah, Jordan Hancock's certainly going to be rested, playing so little the past 2 weeks. And you look at Tez Johnson, his catches compared to everybody else. I don't know if they're force feeding him or if he's the first guy in the progression, but he's got so many more catches than everybody else that it's hard to just for him to not be the focal point for the defense. And Jordan Hancock will be there. He'll be on him. You look at the last 3 weeks against Oregon State, 7 catches for 110 yards. Against UCLA, 11 for 121. And in Michigan State last week, 10 for 84. Go back to week 2 against Boise State. 3 catches, -1 yards. Tom, you had more yards receiving than Tez Johnson. Week 2. And so that potential is there as well. If they don't let him off the line, they're going to throw the ball to him behind the line of scrimmage. They're going to do some quick slants, RPOs, and things like that for him. But if you don't let him off the line, then you're going to have a pretty good shot of not just tackling him right then, but not even letting him into the route tree, basically.
Yeah, and if you can take that away, that takes a big piece of that Oregon offensive way. Because again, that's not where the big plays come from, but that's where some of the important plays come from. And if you can eliminate that, that's a lot of the, Randy talked about the short passing game being an extension of the run game, and the horizontal passing game being an extension of the run game. I think that is a little bit of an extension of the run game for Oregon as well. If you can take away some of the run, the interior run, as one of the viewers was suggesting earlier, and then you can also take away Tez Johnson, boy, that really limits what Oregon can do and narrows some of the things you got to defend. Did
You're
we
back,
lose?
Tom. I'm back now.
Okay. All right. Good. Let's see. How about this one from Chris Jimenez? Which special teams unit has a bigger impact on the game, kicker, punter, or the returners? Thanks for the show and safe travels.
I'll go with the punters, putting the ball back and inside the 20, inside the 15. I don't expect Ohio State to do anything with the return game, and they'd be foolish to allow Oregon to do something with the return game. So I'm not expecting Ohio State to try to pin the kickoffs at the 5 and tackle them. I would expect them to try to put the ball through the end zone on every kickoff. And then with punting, it's hard to return punts nowadays anyways. And if Ohio State is short on their punts like they've been all season long, there's not really much. They're not out-kicking their coverage, basically. So I don't know how much of an impact the return game will have in this one, which means if it has an impact, then somebody's going to be a huge beneficiary of that. But I'll say punting, man, field position in something like this and forcing the defense to go 85 yards instead of 65 is going to be huge.
Yeah, I think if special teams is kind of a non-factor, that's probably good for Ohio State. It feels like Oregon would benefit greatly from getting a big return in special teams, either just to set up a short field or to score points. They've scored, I believe, on both the kickoff and punt return this year. So that's potentially an area where Oregon could cut into some of Ohio State's perhaps potential talent advantages. If special teams is a non-factor, I think that's a good thing for Ohio State. Justin Courtney, another thing that I think might be a non-factor, the big 1G data on these cross-country road trips, not good for the traveling team thus far. I think if you look at a lot of those teams, the traveling team in almost all those cases was already the underdog. So this is not, we'll see what happens when Oregon goes across country to the haunted house in West Lafayette next week. But it's been a lot of Michigan's not very good this year. So when they go to Washington and lose, I don't know if it's the plane. Washington's not very good this year. So when they go cross country to Rutgers, I don't know if it's the plane. UCLA, I think, has been a part of 2 of those. UCLA is very bad this year. So other than USC going to Minnesota, which was, the helmets tell you that USC should win that game. This year, I think the talent level is a little closer than maybe the helmets would suggest. But I think the talent level of the teams has a lot more correlation to who won rather than who was on an airplane.
Well, also, I mean, there's a home field advantage for a reason. So when you compare it, when you combine home field advantage with also being the favorite, don't be shocked if the home team wins all of those. As we've talked about before, Ryan Day, they're going to stay on Eastern time on Friday and Saturday. They're going to do all of the things they normally do, all of the same things they did when they went to Michigan State the week before. They're not getting here on Thursday like some teams are choosing to do. Interestingly, Tom, the one team to get that win was Indiana, and they are doing exactly what Ryan Day did. They stayed on Eastern time when they went to UCLA. So maybe that's the only reason they beat the Bruins.
Maybe. That's certainly one possible explanation, yes. Ethan Maxfield wants to know, did Kansas State, which of course is Will Howard's former team, play Oklahoma, which of course is Dylan Gabriel's former team last year? The answer is no. However, they did play in 2022. Kansas State ended up winning that game. But that was, I think, a very good game. And I think both quarterbacks played pretty well in that one.
I don't believe Will Howard has ever played against Oklahoma. Adrian Martinez was the quarterback in 22. And so they played – those three teams have played like 3 times during Will Howard's career, but it's always been another quarterback. It's always been a stretch where he's not been starting. So,
okay.
So they have not played against each other. Because somebody was asking me today about, or yesterday, about big games that Will Howard has played in. Like, hasn't he played against Oklahoma? And I went and looked. I said, no, actually, no stats against Oklahoma.
Sorry. Sorry. I apologize for the crying baby in the background. It is not mine. It is also not Kevin, so I have no control over the situation. I apologize. Peace Clan says, I say we unload the clip. This one in Penn State is the most difficult for the rest of the regular season. Kitchen sink, anyone? I don't think they're holding anything back this week.
No, I will also say, don't say unload the clip. Refs will flag you for any mention or motion of any type of armed anything. So come up with a different analogy. But yeah, they're not going to hold anything back in this one. I think this is one where both coaches know that what is huge, a loss does not kill you. So why not go out there and just swing with everything you have? The whole swing away mentality from Ryan Day against Georgia. Just go at it. And if you lose, you lose. You're probably going to see it again later on down the road. That's part of the leave no doubt thing. Doesn't mean just blow somebody out. It just means if you lose having given everything. And it doesn't mean lose settling for a 50-yard field goal to see if you can win the game with no time left on the clock. It means let's get as close as we can and then get a little bit closer and not need a field goal.
Yeah, I think that you kind of brought up an interesting point a minute ago, which is the winner of this game benefits much more than the loser of this game suffers. A loss in this game, unless you get beat by 4 touchdowns, a loss in this game, a close loss to the number 2 or number 3 team in the country, is not going to be held against you very harshly. You're not going to drop to 18th in the polls or anything like that. If you lose, even if you lose by a couple touchdowns, you're not dropping to 18th in the polls. The winner of this team is functionally, to me, basically in the college football playoff already, where there are only so many losable games left on each of these team schedules, and you will already have potentially a top, what's going to show up as a top 5 win at the end of the season. You win this game, you're probably at worst playing a home game in the first round of the playoffs. Really at worst. Even, let's play this out. Ohio State wins this weekend by 6 points at Oregon. They go back and they lose at Penn State. They lose again in the Big Ten championship game, for example, or maybe even, they lose to Michigan. So you're 10-2. You didn't play in the Big Ten championship game. You're probably, even with that, with a win over Nebraska, a win over Iowa, a win over Oregon on the road, you're probably still looking at an 8 seed, maybe something like that. And that's losing a couple games down the line where you're going to be favored and not making the Big Ten championship game. I think there are not many scenarios where the winner of this team misses the college football playoff or has to go on the road in the first round of the college football playoff. This is potentially a really, really, really big win. And the downsides of a loss are not nearly as big as the upsides for a win.
Better than losing to Vandy.
Yes. Many things, in fact, are better than that. Drowsy Dragon wants to know if we see Will Howard running a lot more this game.
He's actually started to run more as we expected once they got into Big Ten play, and I would expect that to continue in this one. When we're talking about the read option, clearly a defense would want to force Howard to run the ball as opposed to dealing with Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson. So it's an opportunity for the defense to force Will Howard to run the ball. And when you look over the last few weeks, 10 carries last week, including a sack, 6 the week before. The previous 3 weeks, he had 8 total. So he's already averaging 8 per game now over the last 2 weeks. With sacks, I wouldn't be shocked if he's at 10 again, something like that. But I do think he needs to, as he said, he needs to be more patient on the called quarterback runs, whether it's the draws or the QB powers. I think you're going to continue to see more of that. You're definitely going to see more of him keeping on the reads if the read calls for it. And I'm still waiting for him to bust a long one because he's done it every year when he's been a runner. So it's going to happen at some point. I don't know if this is the week. Oregon plays a lot of zone, so they're not necessarily going to have their backs turned towards him. So you might see more like 7 to 9 yard gains, extend the chains, that sort of thing, move the chains, extend the drive, rather than I don't know that this is the week for a 70-yarder, but it could be the week for a 25-yarder.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the threat of Will Howard running is going to be as important as Will Howard actually running. Just to be that +1 in the run game, to hold that extra defender, that potentially gives John Judkins, Travion Henderson, one fewer guy to have to break a tackle, one fewer guy to have to block, one fewer guy to defend the pass game. That feels like that's probably going to be the most direct impact. We have seen Will Howard bust along when he had a 70-yarder, this spring in one of the scrimmages or in one of the practices we were at. So we have seen him. We know that's part of his game, and it's going to happen at some point. But, yeah, it feels like that's one that's not necessarily going to be – you're right, not necessarily going to be this weekend. They don't need it this weekend. They just need him to be a factor in the run game. That's probably enough. David Whalen wants to know which conference officials will call the game. It is a Big Ten conference game, so Big Ten officials will call the game. For better or for worse. Mika Hanna says, Joe Offerty needs to stay. Flip Brew, Lynn, Jakeem Stewart, make Trey McNutt wish he was a Buckeye. This is a big recruiting weekend for Oregon. And, you'll have a lot of top players in the country who are looking at both schools get a chance to watch Ohio State up close.
Well, and I think Dorian Brew is going to be at this game along with Naeem Alford. So it's going to be an opportunity for those two to connect again, even though some would tell you part of the reason Brew ended up in Oregon is because Alford is committed to Ohio State, that sort of thing. But, yeah, a very big weekend. This is the kind of weekend where whatever the results are, your pitch changes to the recruits. If you win, you're like, come be part of this. If you lose, see, we need you. And you just use whatever happens here to your advantage, even though you'd much rather be like, wouldn't you want to be part of this, rather than if we had you, we would have won.
Greg Keppel wants to know why not use RPOs. I think you're going to see a bunch of RPOs this week because typically the best way to defend an RPO is man coverage. You play real tight man coverage, and that's a good way because then you're not putting guys in conflict because you have one person you're not putting in conflict. If Oregon's running a lot of zone, that's typically something that, we're speaking very broadly here, but that's typically a defense that RPOs are going to work reasonably well against. And Will Howard has shown he's making good decisions. He's executing well on those. So I would expect to see a decent number of those this weekend.
Yeah, I would agree. Have we defeated the listeners? Are we?
Yes, we are through. So we are going to get on. We'll have more coverage for you a little later on this afternoon. We'll have a couple bonus episodes come a little later on this afternoon on our YouTube channel. And then the plan is when we're in Portland, it'll be early evening East Coast time. So figure 8 to 9 o'clock, maybe East Coast time, something like that. We're planning on being at the hotel, depending on rental cars and traffic and hotel Wi-Fi and where we have to go to dinner and all that kind of stuff. Baggage. Is our flight on time. Yeah, baggage, yes, all of that stuff. So we'll keep an eye on. This is one of these weekends when this would be a great time if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel to hit the subscribe button, to hit the bell, because we are planning on doing another live show later tonight. Then we're going to be down in Eugene all day on Friday and all day on Saturday for lots of coverage there. So there's going to be a ton of coverage coming for you. Make sure you're subscribed there. Also, this would be a great time, Tony, to subscribe to BuckeyeHuddle.com as well.
Absolutely would. No better time, in fact. So go ahead and do that. It is a fantastic way to support us. So that will do it. Before we leave, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. We would appreciate it. But thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.